The United States has a sacred obligation to keep faith with the promises we've made to those who have worn our nation's uniform. That's something that we want to underscore at the very beginning and has been a principle of this research. Particular administrative policies, though, about pay and benefits aren't themselves sacred. What we have observed is a number of organizations looking at thematic change to the compensation system within the bounds of keeping that faith. One of those themes is how you measure the sufficiency of compensation, what gets counted as compensation, and then how it's compared to the civilian economy, also how it's compared to inflation. How different compensation policies benefit or don't benefit the force. There's a difference between the cost of a benefit and its perceived value. And then last, as a theme in this section, is how the costs and benefits align in order to provide some measure of the value of compensation. So for an example, I'm going to use the retirement system. Retirement sufficiency is judged by defining a payout. This stands in contrast, for instance, to defining a contribution and changes the risk that the government takes on managerially in the course of service members' careers in order to provide that payout. How does it benefit service members? Well, it provides a great benefit to those that make it to retirement. The Defense Advisory Commission on Military Compensation found that about 47% of officers and about 15% of enlisted personnel will make it to retirement. So to put those two pieces together, you have a relatively high cost that accrues for each service member in order to be provided for a more narrow group of service members. Just one example of pay possibilities, compensation possibilities. Now, all of the groups that we surveyed had some ideas about how that might change. I'm going to summarize them in three pieces. One is make compensation more transparent. You can start with salary, which generally groups into the basic military compensation title that experts will use. You can add to that allowances that service members receive for subsistence, for housing, as well as income tax subsidies to get a little bit of a broader perspective on that compensation. You can go even farther and roll in the cost of retirement and retiree health care for that individual. And as you extend that definition, you get a different comparison with inflation and a different comparison with the civilian workforce that has led some people to look at possible changes. The next summary option is to maximize value, the difference between the cost of a program and the value that a service member perceives from it. CBO budget options, as one example, routinely puts out the idea of converting the indirect dependent education benefit into a direct subsidy. That allows the member who receives it to see it more transparently and feel more value from it than when it's provided indirectly to that service member vis-a-vis the school. And then the last is how benefits or how compensation is dispersed. There's a typical profile for service members. The better that compensation fits that experience, the more value they're likely to feel from that compensation. The less it fits with that experience, the more you have disjoints in the sense of value. Healthcare is one way to look at that. There's a very generous option for working age retirees to participate in military healthcare. Again, only if you actually reach retirement eligibility. If you don't make it to that point, you don't feel the benefit and you're dispersing compensation in a way that may not match with the typical service member's experience.